As always, it's good to be with you tonight and continue worshiping our God together this Sunday. If you want to go ahead and get out your Bibles and turn to 2 Chronicles 25, we're going to cover and give you a synopsis of the king Amaziah. He's going to be 4 generations from Hezekiah ahead of him. Kind of puts you an idea of where he is. And he's in the genealogy of Christ. And even having said that, if you want to even know further where he is, he lives during the time period of Elisha. Near close to Elisha's death, Amaziah would have taken the throne in Judah. Now, if you had told me and asked me last week who King Amaziah was, I'd have no clue. If you asked me last Sunday, I would have had no clue. But now I do. And now I know something, and now you're going to know something about him. So I was working on this sermon. I got done Thursday, and I did coordinate with Mr. Terry. I really did, but somehow it just didn't work out. Because this sermon is going to be very similar to what we talked about this morning, but looking at it from a different perspective. And not only that, but at least 4 of my Bible verses, Mr. Rusty covered this morning in Bible class. So I was sitting there through this morning, and I enjoyed it. It was wonderful. It really was. But on the other hand, I'm just dreading every minute of it because I'm losing all my thunder. Just about every single piece. So this is the deal with this sermon. I can make this a Sunday night 35-minute sermon. And I can go over a lot of stuff we have already gone over. Or I can give you my message, and we will be done when I get done. We could do it that way. Now, this is not a democracy, but if we voted, I think we pick option 2. There will be no rambling. There will be no rambling. So I'm going to give you my message. And I think, though, even though we've already gone over a lot of this stuff, this will capitalize on a lot of the things we've already talked about. And maybe this will be a heart Sunday. A Sunday about our hearts and a Sunday about glorifying God together. King Amaziah. 2 Chronicles 25, to just give you a brief synopsis of his entire life that we have recorded here. Verses 1 and 2, Jason has already read this for us. There's something interesting said about him. He takes the throne when he's 25 years old. Amaziah was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoiadan of Jerusalem, and he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, but not with a loyal heart. And I think this is one of the things that's so interesting about him, is that he actually was following all the commandments of God except for the heart part. So on the outward, in his physical works and the things that he did, he was doing everything right, but he wasn't doing it with a loyal heart, or if you're reading the ESV, it says with his whole heart. So there was a heart problem, even though the commandments were being done. Now what's interesting is when we read about people in the Bible and we see in our own experience, usually this is the other way around. We see someone who's not doing anything right, and they do have a heart problem. But here actually, he's doing everything right, but he is still having the heart problem. Now what this is it's going to continue on, and it's going to cause more problems in his life. So this is the problem, is that he doesn't have this loyal heart. God recognizes it. You have an example in verses 3 and 4 of this happening, of him actually keeping God's commandments. Verse 3, now it happened, as soon as the kingdom was established for him, that he executed his servants who had murdered his father, the king. However, he did not execute their children, but did as it is written in the law in the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded, saying, the fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor shall the children shall be put to death for their fathers, but a person shall die for his own sin. And this here is quoting Deuteronomy 24:16. And what the law was that if you did something wrong, your father nor your child would to be punished or executed for what you did. You would be punished for what you did. And this is exactly what he does. He follows the law of Moses. Then I was going to spend a lot of time talking about how we're not guilty of what our parents did. And that was, if you remember, Mr. Terry's very first point from Ezekiel 18. That we are not guilty of what our parents have done. Neither we are guilty of what our children do in their life. However, we will be judged from our influence on those people. But this is reflection of the old law. And this is what he does. He follows what he's been commanded to do through the law of Moses. We see next that he's going to start paying soldiers and gathering these troops to go take care of the Edomites. And as we know, the Edomites were problems through almost the entire lifespan of Israel. And this is just a classic that it's time to go whip up on them. And so he gets these different tribes together, and then he starts paying them for their services. Verse 5 of chapter 25. Moreover, Amaziah gathered Judah together and set over the captains of thousands and captains of hundreds, according to their fathers' houses, throughout all Judah and Benjamin. And he numbered them from 20 years old and above, and he found them to be 300,000 choice men, able to go to war, who could handle spear and shield. He also hired 100,000 mighty men of valor from Israel and 100 talents of silver. But a man of God came to him, saying, O king, do not let the army of Israel go with you, for the Lord is not with Israel, not with any of the children of Ephraim. In verse 8, he says, But if you go, be gone, be strong in battle, even so, God shall make you fall before the enemy, for God has power to help and to overthrow. So to sum up, that he pays these soldiers to go take care of the Edomites, but a man of God comes to him with a message from God. And the message from God is, you want to go do this, and I understand that, but there's something you need to know. You do not need to take the Ephraimites with you, because the children of Ephraim are not right with me right now. And if you go, which he says you can go be strong in battle, go be gone. However, if you take the Ephraimites, you will lose, because I'm not with them. So immediately, Amaziah, instead of being like, oh, okay, this is what I do, thank you for telling me this message, he immediately, the first thing we read is he's concerned about the money. He's concerned about all the silver he's going to lose because he's going to send these of Ephraim home. And that's verse 9. Then Amaziah said to the man of God, But what shall we do about the 100 talents which I have given to the troops of Israel? And the man of God answered, The Lord is able to give you much more than this. And then it goes, so Amaziah discharged the troops, as those are from Ephraim. So he says, but what about all the money? And the man of God answers very simple. God can give you a lot more than you just lost. Why are you worried about that? So he goes ahead and he discharges them. When he goes, he wins the battle because God said he was going to do. And then he immediately brings back the gods that he got from Edom and he starts worshiping them, which is completely ridiculous. And he's going to explain why it's completely ridiculous in verse 15. I'm going to save that for our application, though. He goes, he starts worshiping. God sends a prophet to him in verse 15. In verse 16, he replies to the prophet, who the prophet's going, God's angry for you doing this. And this is his reply to the prophet in verse 16. So it was as he talked with him that the king said to him, Have we made you the king's counselor? Cease. Why should you be killed? Then the prophet ceased and said, I know that God has determined to destroy you because you have done this and have not heeded my advice. So he tells the prophet of God to cease, and the prophet does what he asked him to do. He ceased. And he says, you know what? God's going to destroy you now. And then what we're going to see later on, if we kept on reading, is that God's just going to give him up. He's going to give him up to the nation of Israel, that he's going to decide that he thinks he needs to challenge. And he goes and he tells the king of Israel, come, let us go do battle. And then actually the king of Israel tries to talk him out of it, but he goes ahead and he does it anyway. And he's just, the nation of Judah is wiped out. Jerusalem actually gets sacked. And then he's going to have conspirators later on in verse 27 that we'll talk about later, who God gives him up to. And the conspirators are going to get together and they're actually going to kill him. So to ask the question, why all these things happened, what would you answer? What led to these train of events? It's verse 2, isn't it? He was doing the commandments, but what? But he did not do it with a loyal heart. Because he did not do it with a whole heart. It didn't matter that he was doing everything right. Because he didn't have the heart to go with it, things fell apart gradually over time. And that's what God's trying to warn us here in 2 Chronicles 25. It is great to keep God's commandments, but there needs to be a heart that goes with it, a loyal heart, a heart that's allied with God our Father. And that's what's going to make all the difference. So let's take some application from this. Because he rejects God's counsel, God gives him up. We covered that. The loyal heart. One thing that we've already covered today, just to reiterate, is that God knows our hearts. So he knew this about Amaziah. If you were living under King Amaziah, you could have seen all the good things that he was doing and say, you know what, I bet this guy's actually very loyal to God. But God knew better because God knows men's hearts. Luke 16:15, Jesus says this to the Pharisees. He talks about how you can't worship God and money. The Pharisees get upset with this because they're greedy, and that's exactly what they're doing. And Jesus replies with this: you are those who justify yourselves before men, but God knows your hearts. You think these people around you think you're right with God, but God knows what's really going on. And that's that you're worshiping money more than you're worshiping Him. You're trying to worship two masters and you've fallen yourself apart. What's interesting about this phrase is usually people of the world will use this phrase to justify what they're doing. It's usually you kind of use like to way that prove myself that I'm innocent. God knows my heart. But when Jesus originally uses the phrase, it's actually to condemn somebody. God knows your heart. And what the thing is, when you hear the phrase, God knows your heart, it shouldn't always be a happy feeling dependent on your condition of your heart. God knows your heart can be a scary phrase. Oh, wow. And Mr. Rusty covered this about there's been times in our lives when we try to bury things deep, right? And we don't want God to know about it. We try to hide from Him and we think we can live double lives. But guess what? He knows. He knows all about it. I was watching, somebody sent me this YouTube video, this little bitty child in his bedroom, and the mom had the video camera in the bedroom of the little child. And the little child has a box of Oreos. And as soon as she opens up the door, he quickly tries to stash the Oreos under his blanket in his bed. And of course, from a parent's perspective, it's silly because we obviously know what's going on. But the child thinks they're doing it. They think they're getting away with it. They're hiding them Oreos. And then she leaves the room, but she leaves the camera on, right? And guess what he does? He sneaks the Oreos out again. He starts eating again. But that way that a parent can see their child and knows everything their child doing, especially when they're that little, is the same way, even more so, that God looks on us at His children. We think we're hiding things from Him, but He knows, and it's plain as day to Him. It's clear. And it wants what it needs to do. It needs to make us wake up and realize that we need to have the right God heart before Him. This is another passage that was referenced this morning, 1 Samuel 16:7. This is when Samuel is choosing who's going to be the next king of Israel by the hearts. And turn there. 1 Samuel 16:7. The next couple of passages will keep us in this area of the Bible. Samuel's told him he's going to choose the next king, and who does he want? He wants the older brothers, the older sons of Jesse, because they're tall and they're good looking. And I would like to think that this would be somebody like me. This would be somebody that Samuel look at and say, wow, he's tall, he's handsome, he's perfect. And this is what we're going to go for, because this is what we see with our eyes. This is what Samuel would expect. This is what humans would expect to do. But we learn something about God here, that God sees us differently. And this is this passage. 1 Samuel 16:7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or as a physical stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So it's already making the point you've already made. He cares a lot more about our heart than about our physical appearance. Now, go to 1 Chronicles 28. Still kind of in the same area. Flip past 2 Samuel into 1 Chronicles. And what I want to show you here is when David says the same thing to his son Solomon before he dies. So the only reason why David is king is because the Lord looks at people's hearts, not at their physical appearance. And when Samuel was doing this stuff in 1 Samuel, he was just a kid out watching the sheep, right? And he gets to call the shepherd boy in because he's the one I'm going to anoint and the one I'm going to make king. The only reason why David and then Solomon is going to be king is because the Lord looks at people's hearts. And that's what he cares about. And he's going to express this against to his son Samuel. 1 Chronicles 28:9. As for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father and serve him with a loyal heart and with a willing mind. For the Lord searches all hearts and understands all the intent of the thoughts. If you seek him, he will be found by you. But if you forsake him, he will cast you off forever. So what is it? God, it's the same thing we've made. It's like the fourth time we've made this point. That God seeks a loyal heart. That's what he wants. He wants a heart that wants to be loyal with him. He wants a heart that wants to have a relationship with him. He wants a heart that's willing to serve him with a willing mind. And because the Lord searches all hearts, he knows if you have a loyal heart or not. He understands the intent of your thoughts. He knows if you truly want to be with him. So if you seek him, what will he do? He will be found by you. You truly want to look for him? He will make sure he is found. Now, the flip side is what he ends with. And it's special that he tells this thing to Solomon because all of their ancestors, as we keep on reading through 1 Kings and 2 Kings and 1 Chronicles and 2 Chronicles, this is their whole message here. The kings that seek God have a really good relationship and their kingdom does pretty well. But then they do the other thing that David said. If you reject God, then he'll reject you. And that's what the other kings do, and that's what Amaziah is going to eventually do that we've already read. So it seems that this is a pattern through the kings, and David's basically telling all of his ancestors from here on out, this is the way God works with us, and this is what you need to do. How would Amaziah know if his heart was wrong or right before God? I think he would have noticed for sure by the way he reacted to the man of God's message about the Edomites and about those of Ephraim that he needed to let go. Because immediately when the man of God says to him, what is he most concerned about? The money. He's concerned about the silver. He's not concerned about doing what's right before God and being right with the Lord. He's worried about the silver that he's going to lose. Matthew 6:21, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That's Jesus who said that. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And Amaziah's treasure was the silver. It wasn't God. It wasn't the kingdom of heaven. It was the silver. And that should have been a wake-up call. And we're going to talk about what he should have done at the end. What you also see about Amaziah is that the Lord is still giving counsel. I thought this was very interesting. So he is keeping the commands of the God, but his heart's wrong. But the Lord is still involved and still working in his life while he's still being obedient to a degree. And you're going to learn something about God with this. Let's all agree about this. We make foolish decisions when we stop listening to God, don't we? And you can think about your own life and your own experience. When you've made the most foolish decisions in your life, it's probably been at a time that you weren't listening to God. And I can say it from my experience, I have made the most foolish decisions in my life when I have shut God out. And what it is because we depend on his counsel. And let's read verse 15 of our original passage, 2 Chronicles 25. 2 Chronicles 25:15. So he goes to Edom, he comes back with the idols, and this is what God sees. 25, let's start in verse 14. Now it was so, after Amaziah came from the slaughter of the Edomites, that he brought the gods of the people of Seir, set them up to be his gods, and bowed down before them and burned incense to them. Therefore the anger of the Lord was aroused against Amaziah, and he sent him a prophet who said to him, why have you sought the gods of the people, which could not rescue their own people from your hand? So why are you worshiping the gods that the Edomites tried to pray to, the Edomites were worshiping to, when you just saw proof that they can't do anything? Because I'll tell you what, the Edomites were praying to those gods, weren't they? They were worshiping those gods. And when they were worshiping those rocks, and when it was time for those rocks to come through for them and protect them from the nation of Judah, what do? They fail. And Amaziah, you know firsthand that they failed because you're the one that attacked them. So why in your right mind would you start worshiping them? You know they can't do anything. And what it is we make the most foolish decisions in our life when we're not listening to God, when we're not heeding his counsel. Because the next thing he's going to say is he's going to say that he's done with them, that he wants God to cease in his life, and so God is going to cease in his life. What's interesting about all of this up until this point, when he tells the prophet that he wants him to cease in his life, is that God is still communicating to him. Isn't that interesting? That even though at the very beginning we learn when he's just 25 in verse 2, that he doesn't have the loyal heart, but he's still trying to keep the commandments, that God is communicating to him. When he wants to go out to Edomites, God sends a man of God to talk to him, to communicate to him. Up and before then, even though after he started to worship his idols, before he tells the prophet to leave him alone, God's trying to communicate to him. And here God has sent a prophet to rebuke him. And I think this is something that's incredible about our God. When we are just trying to do what's right, and maybe our heart's not there yet, he's still working with us. He's still giving us a chance. And this is his long suffering, isn't it? That he sees, maybe Andrew's on autopilot right now. Maybe he's not thinking with his heart. Maybe he doesn't have a true loyalty to me, but at least he's doing some things right. I'm going to work with him. And maybe that's communicate through his word. Maybe I need to read more. Maybe he can providentially work in my life somehow to get me to his word. But he would still be trying to work with me because I have not completely given him up. And he has not completely given me up yet. And this is awesome. This is amazing that he would bear with Amaziah for as long as he did, just for the chance to turn his heart. And if he had followed through and would have listened to the Lord, I think eventually at the end of this story, if he had listened, would be that his heart would have changed and he would have been loyal. But he continues to work while Amaziah is obeying the commandments of God. God's still working with them. I've heard some very bold statements said from very bold people that if they'll tell a Christian, well, you know what, if your heart's not in it, then you should just quit. And I don't know if that's true. In 2 Chronicles 25, after reading this, I know that's not true. If you feel like you're having a heart problem and you can tell yourself honestly, my heart's not in this, let me encourage you to keep on trying. Keep on coming to worship. Keep on doing what's right. Keep on following God's commandments. Because as long as you are doing that, God will be working with you. And he is going to help you find a solution. And that solution will be creating that clean heart, that pure heart, that heart that God wants for all of us. So let's keep on keeping on. Now, eventually for Amaziah's case, God is going to give him up because he is going to tell the prophet to cease. Amaziah did give up on him first. And I think that's very important. He gave up on God first. He was obviously worshiping the false gods, but he also was going to reject the Lord's prophet. Now, if he's rejecting the Lord's prophet, then he's rejecting God's message. Therefore, he is rejecting God's word. And that would be the application from us. God doesn't send me a prophet anymore, but he does send me a lot of letters written by a lot of prophets and a lot of apostles, doesn't he? When I reject this, that's when I've turned my back on God. When I just know, you know what, I don't care anymore about him. I don't want to listen to him. When people try to come and talk to me about him, I don't want to listen to that. That's when you give up on God. And as David said, what happens when you give up on God? God gives up on you. Now, that's not to say that he won't take you back. He will take you back. There's other passages we can read about him taking you back. But that means you need to return to him so he can return to you. And what he's going to do is he's going to give him up to the nation of Israel. That's going to come down and is going to wipe up the country. And he's going to give him up to the conspirators that are going to try to attack him, which is going to eventually end up in his death. Because God's going to open him up to all these evil things, because God's not going to protect him anymore. Verse 27 of chapter 25, and after the time that Amaziah turned away from following the Lord, they made a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish, but they sent after him to Lachish and killed him there. When did the conspiracy happen against him? When he turned away from the Lord, because the Lord had given him up to these people, to this evil, because he quit on them, even though God was trying as hard as he could to get him back. Let's turn to Romans chapter 1. Mr. Terry referenced this morning in his introduction. I was scared he was going to read it, but instead he just summarized it, so I'm going to read it with you. But we talked about this in our Monday night class, and I thought we had a really good discussion, and this is what came out at the end of it. And this is what kind of led me to want to talk about Amaziah, because this fits Romans 1 perfectly. Chapter 1, verse 20, he's already told us that every person has the opportunity to know the power of God because of his invisible attributes. And that's what we see in creation. So you get to know God's power through creation. So in that case, none of us have an excuse anymore, because we should have already known God's power through creation. Verse 21 says, because although they knew God, and that's through creation, They did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. So they didn't glorify God, they weren't thankful, but instead they became futile in their thoughts, and what happens? Their hearts darkened. And what it is they're giving up on God, aren't they? And that's causing them more problems in their heart. They professed to be wise, verse 22, they became fools. They changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. And this is exactly what Amaziah does, doesn't he? He starts worshiping the creation instead of the Creator because it's all a heart problem. Verse 24, therefore God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lust of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise, also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust for one another, men with men committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error which is due. And even as they did not like to retain the God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do the things which are not fitting. So even though we all are without excuse, we know who God is, because we let our hearts be darkened, because we refuse to have the loyal heart, God gave us up. And he'll give us up to the evil. He'll give us up to uncleanness. He'll give us up to all these evil things which he goes on to list. He's already mentioned homosexuality here, but he'll go on to list unrighteousness, wickedness, covetousness, malicious, murder, disobedient to parents, all of these things that he gives us up to because obviously we didn't want them anymore. And when he gives us up to these things, what happens to us? It's the end of verse 32. And it's the same thing that happened to Amaziah. Those that practice such things are deserving of death. And also those that approve of the practice of them. Death. Amaziah, not only those who do it, but those who approve of it. Death. So what's the solution? Because I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be given up on. So what we do is we look at the passage backwards. What it is, we've slid down, and we're going to go back to what happened originally. What happened when God gave them up? What could have they done differently? And that's verse 21. The first problem. The very first problem, even though they knew God, they did not glorify him. They did not glorify him. And it's hard to describe glorified because it encompasses so much. But when you do what you're designed to do by the Creator, you are glorifying God. When nature does what it's supposed to do to design the Creator, it is glorifying God. When you do and enact the plan that God has bled for, you are glorifying God. All those things that you're just doing right, you're having the right heart, you're striving to have a relationship with Him, all those things would be glorifying God. And when you glorify God, your heart's not darkened because you're doing what you were designed to do. And things work out. And that loyal heart starts growing because guess what? That loyal heart is being what it was designed to be, a heart devoted to God. Also, they weren't thankful. So what I need to do is I need to be thankful. And you could go back in this passage of creation, be thankful for the things that are around you, that we have this earth, that we get to enjoy it. But we go to anything. Be thankful that Jesus came and died for you. Be thankful that you have brothers and sisters in Christ. Be thankful you have a family. Be thankful you have a job. Anything. If you're thankful and understand that God, the one who deserves all glory, gave you those things, your heart can't be darkened. I'm so thankful for what He's done for me, the people He's put in my life. That's awesome. Because I worship an awesome God that deserves all the glory. And I need to be thankful for Him. And if I am thankful for Him, we can look at verse 21 backwards. We will not be futile in our thoughts. Our thoughts will be meaningful, and our hearts will not be darkened. They will be filled with light because I'm doing what I'm designed to do, and I will be growing the loyal heart. One step for us, I said that Amaziah, he should have checked himself when he went after the silver. And that would have told him where his heart truly stood. And I wanted to end this with giving us a check. And I think the check for us to test our hearts would be worship. And this is why I took this from Psalms 9:1, if you can read it up here on the screen. The majority of the time the phrase loyal heart or whole heart is used in the Bible, it's associated with worship. And I think there's a reason for that. Psalms 9:1, I will praise you, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will tell of all your marvelous works. I will be glad and rejoice in you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. What is he doing here? He's praising the Lord with his whole heart, with his loyal heart. What you can do is you can check yourself by seeing and evaluating the way you worship. Are you worshiping with a whole heart? And that's just not paying attention to the sermon. That's part of it. But did you pay attention when we prayed today? Did you pay attention and focus on Christ when we took the Lord's Supper? When we sang, did you sing to praise the name of Him Most High? Or did you sing just because you went on autopilot and you were just following the commandments of God without being loyal, without having the right heart? I think a lot of us can fall trapped to that, but if we notice that check, what we can do is we can start glorifying God and we can start thinking about how thankful we are, and that's going to create that loyal heart, and that's what's going to grow it. I encourage you always, if we ever lose our sight in this, is to keep on trying and keep on trusting that as long as we follow Him, He will take care of the problems. And He will take care of our heart problem, if so it needs to be done. Thank you for your attention as always. If there's anyone here tonight that needs Jesus in their lives, they need that loyal heart, and the only way they're going to be able to receive the right kind of heart is if Jesus fixes them first. God is offering you this always, but He'll give you this opportunity right now, and we want to give you this opportunity right now to assist you in that. If there's anyone that we can spiritually need that we can meet, please come forward as we stand and as we sing.